Our next session, Achhe Technology and the Nation, shall start right now.
Technology is a big part of our society and our formidable future. There is little room for people who wish to live without technology, and luckily it is still advancing at a rate that has helped stave off stagnation, extensively contributing in progressing the nation. A very warm welcome to everyone to the last day of the 10th edition AKLF 2019, celebrating a decade of literary excellence. We will be beginning our next event for the evening, Achhe, Technology and the Nation, with Mr. Ravi Agrawal, who is a journalist and author. Mr. Agrawal has worked as in various capacities at the CNN in London, New York and New Delhi. Presently, he is the Managing Director of Foreign Policy. We also have with us Mr. Meghdut Chowdhury, who is the Director of Global Operations, Techno India Group. He is also a startup mentor and public speaker. Along with us, we have Mr. Rajanveer Singh Kapoor, a young IAS officer who has been extensively involved in literature, art and mentoring. He has been the editor of Reminiscence, the IAS Alumni Association literary magazine published at the LBSNAA, Missouri. He has also been the editor of Avante Garde literary magazine and also a founder member of NGO Pratigya Abhiyan, which has been helping needy children since its inception in 2006 at TAD, his university. And last but not the least, moderating the discussion is Mr. Avik Chanda, who is a business advisor, CXO coach and speaker at the Outstanding Speakers Bureau. He is also a poet with 2 collections, Jokhun Bideshe, Protibhash and Footnotes, Shazman UK to his name. Before we start off with the event, I would like just a minute to thank our sponsors and partners without whose support this event wouldn't have been successful. I would like to show my earliest gratitude to the institutional partners, development consultants, Tolly Club, Kolkata Center for Creativity, Consular General of Italy, Australia Council for Arts, the Creative Arts, Calcutta Heritage Collective, Intact. I would also like to thank the session partners, Kalam, Zuban and Sasqua Puj Foundation, India Foundation for the Arts, Khwaja Ahmed Abbas Memorial Trust, and I would also like to thank the wellness partner VLCC. I would now hand over to the moderator, Mr. Avik Chanda, to carry forward the proceedings.
Thanks for that quite generous citation, and good evening and thanks to all of you for joining us. I mean, living in this digital age, you've not just got 100 demands on your time, you've probably got more than 100,000 distractions as well, right? So with all of the digital gadgets and parallel sessions as well taking place at AKLF, you've chosen us, so we're very honored. Thank you. We'll get started at the outset with Ravi, who's our guest all the way from New York. And what I wanted to begin with is a very important insight in your book, India Connected. And let me just preface that. Yeah. Are we okay?
So that's for the camera.
That's okay. Yeah, we're using that one. No worries. So I just need to preface that with the scenario, right? So all of us here in the room have access to technology. All of us have this smartphone, right? Which is the motive that you use all through your book. And if you walk down to the corner of Park Street, a few steps away, there's this very well-known panwala who also has access to that phone and by corollary to that technology, right? So is technology just taking smartphones and connectivity, right? There is no such thing that you and I have a business class, first class SMS service, and Ravi has a coach class SMS service, right? He enjoys the same SMS service as you and I do. So is technology the great equalizer then?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for having us here. I think technology really is an equalizer, especially in a place like India. And the way I often frame this is to see that, you know, on the one hand, we are divided by technology. So, you know, Meghdut here may have a very expensive iPhone and the Panwala may have a 3,000 rupee phone. So in that sense, we are divided. However, the real equalizing force here is the fact that never before in history has there been so much computing power packed into one tiny device. And you know, for most Indians, the smartphone is not only their first computer, it is also their first camera, and their first streaming device, and their first TV, and their first Walkman and MP3 player. It's a first of everything in one small device. If it weren't for the smartphone, most Indians would never get any of these technologies. Go back to the year 2000. In the year 2000, only 2% of Indians had PCs, less than 3% of Indians had telephone landlines. At that trajectory and at that rate, it would have taken decades for most Indians to get online. The smartphone has changed all of that. And the reason why that is a big equalizer, so there's A, the fact that they have the internet, B, the fact that through smartphones which are truly multilingual, you don't need to just be an English speaker anymore, you can be a Hindi or a Bangla speaker. 3, you could even be illiterate, you can speak to your phone now, and voice technology means it will understand you. So you have access to the internet, and what do you do with this access to the internet? And that really then becomes the question of you know, how much of a use in your life is it? And there really is no great way of calculating changes to personal life or GDP through technology. But there are a few nascent studies showing that even the use of Google Maps, even the use of Google to be able to ask it a question and not have to go to a library, even the fact that you can not wait in line for 3 hours and pay an electricity bill or transfer money to the village, those mini efficiencies mean that on average people's lives are better, they are more productive, they are likely to make more money and more use of their time. Given all of those reasons, it's fair to say that people are better off, especially in a place like India where none of these people would have gotten online were it not for the smartphone. So that's why in my book, India Connected, I describe the phone as truly transformative, as revolutionary, as something that takes India to a place that it wouldn't have otherwise been at. And the analogy I use is that of the car. Now the car transformed America in the 20th century with the creation of an infrastructure of roads and highways and the interstate system, and an infrastructure of everything from the multiplex and the shopping mall and the drive-in and all of that stuff, and you take that, transpose it to India, and there is a sense that just like the car became a vehicle for the American dream, just like the car became a motif for social mobility and freedom in America, the smartphone could be something similar for a young generation of Indians. There's a lot of bad that could come with the phone as well, but I think it's important for us to focus on the good, especially us, those of us who are elite and sitting here and have been on the internet for 15 years, because you know, our lives have changed incrementally, but for most Indians, the hundreds of millions of Indians who are discovering the internet today, their lives are going to change monumentally. And that really is the thing we need to keep in mind with technology.
So if you go from a premise or a position where technology has made the lives of millions of people much better than it was ever before in their history, you go to the other end of the spectrum altogether, wherein, and you know I'm from the corporate world, and my friends and colleagues in consulting very zealously endeavor to propagate the perception that technology is a panacea. You have any problem that you can think of, right? Technology is going to solve it for you. There might be a price, it might cost $1 million more than you can afford, it might have to retrench people, doesn't matter, but technology is the cure-all, it's the answer to everything, right? And what's your perspective on that?
Well, I think that's a false premise. There is no such thing as a fix-all. It's like saying electricity will fix everything. You know, 150 years ago when the Indian railways were created, Karl Marx said that this is a thing that is going to end the caste system in India. You know, when electricity came around, everyone was convinced that now there'll be a light in every Indian home and poverty will be eliminated. When the TV came around, everyone was convinced that with a TV in every home, people will finally have access to, you know, the world, and therefore they'll be more enlightened and educated. And all of those things were true to some extent. But the notion that any of these things are fix-alls is crazy. And so the notion that the smartphone will be a fix-all is also, I think, completely insane. And anyone who propagates that myth is likely involved in, I mean, you mentioned the corporate world, but maybe they're profiting off of it. See, the thing is, it all depends on how you use it. And we have to approach technology knowing that it has the power to do a lot of good, it has the power to do a lot of bad. I mean, if you think of fake news, you think of pornography, you think of screen addiction, which is increasingly a very real and serious problem in the West, those are all things that are beginning to be seen here in the same way and will become Indian problems in a major way. Fake news is already a very big problem in India. So, you know, as much as they are equalizers, as much as they are helping a generation of Indians, mostly poor Indians, get online, equalize, you know, have access to the same things that richer Indians have had, it will also bring with it a range of problems. The reason why I often use the car as an analogy for the smartphone in India is that it works the same way on the darker side of things. So the way in which the car has long been seen as something that will make life more efficient, will connect people, the car has also been seen as a weapon of mass destruction. You know, a car can kill people, and that's the reason why governments and the private sector have spent so much money on campaigns to teach people not to drink and drive, on campaigns to wear seatbelts when they're driving. And we must see smartphones in the same way. They are tools of great efficiency and productivity, and they are equalizers, but equally they are weapons that can be misused. And so I think anyone who tries to portray any of these technologies in a black or white way is doing us a disservice. They're very nuanced, and it depends on how we wield it and how we use it.
Interesting that remark on railways by Marx, right? Because the converse of it is when railways per se were first introduced in England, the most vehement opposer of that was Wellington, who had by then graduated to becoming Prime Minister of England, right? And when asked, why do you oppose it? Is it, you know, it's going to spoil the beauty of the English landscape or the countryside? No, no. It's going to make sure that the commoners can go anywhere. Yeah, so which was, that's what his main arm was about. Right, we talked about the corporate world, but there is yet another word, right? There is the entire world of public goods and services, which we often take for granted, but which is very much out there, right? We get into a bus, we get into the metro, and there is this huge public sector which is operating. And Rajan, you've worked extensively in e-governance. So how has the proliferation of technology or the equipment of technology helped the departments such as yours, or the government as a whole, to address problems of the ecosystem?
So, very valid points made by Ravi just a few minutes back. So, when we look at public service delivery in a country like India, we cannot look at Calcutta, because it's the capital. We cannot look at Chandigarh, that's the capital. I worked in one of the most backward districts, not just in the country, in Bengal, but the entire country. And trust me, 10 years back, people would, I could not say misuse, but then could manipulate a lot of things at the ground level without anyone in Calcutta or Delhi knowing about it. Now, almost all government schemes under the ambit of the central government or maybe the state government are having electronic records. For instance, the Kanyashri scheme run by the government of West Bengal. So, I mean, a small office, a panchayat office in Purulia, which is like one of the most backward districts of the state that we're sitting in, can actually fill in the forms electronically, and I sitting in Calcutta can see what's going on. So it really has helped that, first of all, the monitoring has become easier, whether it's national or state level. At the same time, the scope for rent-seeking mechanism has gone down. Now people are aware that, you know, I can go online, submit my complaint, and I can take a feedback, I can, you know, write to the district magistrate. It wasn't the case earlier. Almost the, I would say the generation which was previous to our generation knows how system was 20 years back. And in the villages or in the districts, it was almost impossible to, you know, kind of get justice in case you were really not treated well. So yeah, every scheme practically now is using technology. Yeah.
Again, we talk about the benefits of technology, but for example, let's switch gears for a little bit. Most of the themes, most of the sessions in the Lit Fest that you and I have been attending for the last couple of days have focused, albeit through fiction, on a conventional, if not postcard perfect reality, a reality where there is harm, etc. And always on the obverse of that, there's this very insidious, ugly underbelly society, right? So you transform that, or transport that theme onto this angle, right? It is because of technology that you have lots of very smart scamsters who can get away with anything. It is probably because of technology that you have the recrudescence of a new form of insurgency, of terrorism. How is the government equipped to handle challenges like that?
So, good question, but a heavy question. I think, I can't make people laugh on this question.
That's why I asked to a heavyweight.
You're probably going by a weight and asking me heavyweight questions. See, I'm not speaking for any government here. I've come here in personal capacity. But if you see, this problem is not just Indian problem. It's like climate change. It's a global problem. Like US cannot say that I will go on polluting the world and India can probably plant trees. We have carbon trading mechanisms, but IT is like that. A person sitting in Ecuador can actually hack a system here, or a person say sitting in Uganda can hack a system in Uttar Pradesh. I mean, there's no linkage. You cannot really define where the problem is, what is happening. But let me tell you, there are a few developments which are going to change things nicely. Like let me allow to be a little technical. EU has come up with a data privacy regulation a few months back, and that is GDPR. That's the best in May 2018. That is considered the best regulation in the world. Now India is coming up with its own personal data privacy law very soon. The bill is there. We've got it inspired from the same EU regulation, but once it's in the picture, the amount of punishment we'll give. Now Meghdut is a rich guy. He owns a lot of companies. Meghdut, you know how much 4% turnover means. It's not profit. The punishment in the new bill that is going to come up is 4%. If in case you are found stealing data of people, if in case you are found doing any hanky-panky with the customers, so yeah, we're going in the right direction. Till now, the IT Act 2000 is governing our rules and regulations. Yes, there have been flaws, because we as a country have, I would say, more important things to think of rather than thinking about a strange cylinder IT problem in some part. But yes, now we are probably going to converge with the global systems, and it's going to be a bad time for the troublemongers. Yeah.
Okay. We live in hope.
Yes.
Right. Meghdut, let's get to the heart of the matter. If you're talking about technology that is driven by innovation, right? And suffice it to say, innovation and technology and all of its fruits are not conferred onto us like manna falling from heaven, right? We have to act on it, we have to work hard at it, and after multiple failed attempts, you come up with something which is really impactful and makes lives better, right? And again, I guess you'd agree with me that over and above the huge companies, the large product companies and the MNCs, it is the crop of the startups, right? The technocrats, the individuals working away in their garages and the labs who are making this innovation come true, right? So how do they feel about the entire technological disruption that's happening across the country?
So startups, you mean?
Startups, being a technopreneur yourself.
Okay. Nice little point there, because the incubator that I run for startups is called Technopreneurs. So I guess you've been stalking me quite a bit, Ravi. But good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be here today amongst all of you. So I've been quite fortunate interacting with a lot of startups in the last couple of years since I've been in Kolkata. And not just that, even before, I've worked in a few startup ecosystems. And I think there's been a huge rise in the number of startups who've come up and been able to successfully use technology and move forward. But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, technology is only an enabler. It's not like people were not doing good work. It's not like people were not building companies for the last 100 years, 200 years. Just because of the advent of technology, maybe the time from going from like a company with $100,000 of revenue to a unicorn the time span has maybe become shorter. But that does not necessarily mean that it's only because of technology that's happening. If you look at some of the big examples of companies which have made it really big, if you look at the Tatas, for example, they made Tata, Tata's been around for such a long time, they made it when there was no technology. it didn't really matter if you had a smartphone or if you had a pager or even if you, you didn't have emails at that point of time. How did they work? So I don't necessarily agree with the premise that technology is this amazing thing that is going to completely change our lives forever. Yeah, it's easier. But again, at the same time, it also adds to a lot of distractions. For example, yesterday I was at the IIT Guwahati Entrepreneurship Summit, and one of the people there, one of the kids, they said, "Hey, I would really like to start a company, but I'm afraid that I'm going to get distracted from my education. And then I will not be able to either focus on my company and I'm going to fail in my school. And I'm very worried about that because my parents are not going to be very happy about it." I was like, yeah, I mean, if you think like that, maybe you should try considering something. How much time do you spend on WhatsApp a day? Sir, I don't know, like 1 hour. How much time do you spend on Instagram? I don't know, like maybe 30 minutes. And on Facebook, another 45 minutes. That's a total of 2.5 hours in your day approximately. If you, instead of doing that, if you focus that time on working on that company of yours which you so want to build, maybe you would have already been sitting on a company, and 3 years down the line when you're about to graduate from college, your journey outwards would have been much easier because either you'd be giving a job to the person who's getting a 9.2 right now, and even if your grades have fallen to an 8 at that point, you can give a job to that next person, or else you would get hired by somebody just because you have that extra experience in the startup field. And that way, technology could be something that brings you back. So I think with young people having unlimited access to technology, it's also a problem because there's a huge lack of regulation. Like, of course, you're 20, 21 years old, and you should not be regulated at that point. But people lose touch at some point. They don't think about what they really want. They get more skeptical, and it's a problem. Also, a lot of times, if you notice that because you're constantly subjected to technology online, you're constantly subjected to the uninterrupted lives of every single person that you know on your timeline. It really brings you back. Like it makes you depressed. I really think our generation has become a lot more depressed because they see the so-called happy lives of every single person on the internet. Everybody is super hot. Everybody is really successful. People take 40 foreign trips a year. How are you going to feel? You're sitting in a little garage in Boshpukur and you're looking at people going to New Zealand 4 times a year. Of course you're going to feel really bad about yourself, right? So that's the way that technology, I think, brings us back a bit as well. It kind of moves away a little bit from the topic. So that's my 2 pence on that.
No, well more than 2 pence. There's another angle to it, right? And I'm still staying with that need for or that addiction. What really, I think, fosters or sustains this addiction, and getting a little bit into pigeon neuroscience, is that unlike a startup, which is a slow burn, because I'm not going to have a brilliant idea every day, right? I've had this brilliant idea, I've come to you as an incubator, I've got this little company, I've got a couple of friends, and we've got the startup going, right? But on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour basis, there is no validation, there is no recognition, there is no approbation. But I post something, I'm doing this amazing session with these amazing people, I get 200 likes on Facebook. That is instant injection of oxytocin, guys. Like it or not, that is neuroscience. You can't beat it, right? And the problem is, it's like any other addiction, right? 200 likes is fine, then 200 likes becomes the norm, then 200 likes becomes not so good, right? Becomes passé, and then I need to have 250 likes. And on one fine day, I don't have 250 likes, I have 50 likes. I go into depression, yeah? So, right? So that's one big challenge. It's true. And again, because we're talking about people at the student level, right? And I recently did an entrepreneurship sprint with the IIT Corpo guys, so I know exactly where you're coming from. Does it also mean this proliferation of technology, the fact that it's changing so dynamically, and also the fact that it's disruptive to the extent that nobody can really predict what the future is going to bring? Does it also mean that we have to relook at the traditional education system? You go in as an engineering student, 4 years, you get this job, you do this, right? How does that have to be?
Oh, absolutely. I had a very funny encounter this morning. So again, going back to this IIT Guwahati story, I'm not trying to brag, but I was coming back from the college to the airport, and one of the guys who was in the car with me was this gentleman called Ranveer Alabadi. If you guys are on YouTube, I don't know if this is the right demographic to be talking about this with, but he's a social media influencer, and he's somebody who has 1.7 million subscribers on YouTube. On every single platform that he's on Instagram, 373. Beer biceps, right? There you are. So there's somebody, that's the demographic I'm talking about. You know as well, right? So beer biceps, he runs this sort of lifestyle blog that fashion, fitness, for all men, entrepreneurship and also personal finance. Very interesting guy, and he was talking to, and I was like, how did you start this journey? It seems very interesting, and he was sharing some insights about this. So. He doesn't make a lot of money out of being on YouTube. YouTube is just a way for him to sort of get the message across to a lot of people. And what he was talking about, that the main chunk of his business actually comes from managing other social media influencers. Now, if you look at, today we are in 2019. Even if you go back to 2015, you didn't have this thing called being a social media influencer. Being a social media influencer was not an actual job. If you went to your parents and said, Papa, मुझे social media influencer बनना है, बोलो घर से निकलो, यहाँ से थप्पड़ मार के घर से निकालोगे, कुछ नहीं होगा, जाओ पढ़ाई करो.
Won't they still say that? Won't they still say that?
They would probably still say it, but if you say I have 1.7 million followers on YouTube, chances are less that they're going to say it. Right?
थप्पड़ नहीं पड़ेगा, it's like,
I mean, I'm not happy about it, but as long as you're making your 2 pence and getting some money at the end of the day. And if you look at it, it's really funny the way that the jobs have changed. A lot of, a 13-year-old with a phone in her hand can be on this platform called, I'm sure you've heard about it, Musically, which has been, oh my god, just the reaction from this side of the room and the reaction from this side of the room are completely different. They really know what I'm talking about. Thanks for being here, guys. But so Musically recently rebranded themselves as TikTok, and currently it's the largest company, the most highly valued company in the world. If you think about it, TikTok is valued at 78 in the terms of how much time that they've been around. It's not in terms of total amount, but it is worth total $78 billion at this point of time, and in the time that it has been around, it's absolutely nothing. So the only reason, because somebody you don't even really sing anything. Just on your phone, you know what Musically is, right? You're just sitting there, making faces at the camera, and you have 1 million followers. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be much better. There's 22 people here, you can reach out to 223,000 people. Maybe it's a better way forward. But these jobs did not exist 5 years ago, and a lot of it has also happened because of proliferation of technology. Now, I'm not saying that all the jobs that you know currently are going to disappear in the next couple of years, but the way that jobs shape up are definitely changing. And if we as promoters of education, if we as educationists are not able to see that way forward, then it's going to be a real big challenge, because we're still focusing on very stringent methods of education. We're still focusing on you finish your education, you do an engineering degree, and I'm at fault here. I'm the director of Techno India Group. We have 70,000 students, 68% of whom are actually engineering students. So this is a huge problem, because the market by itself only values people with degrees. Now, even if you look at a country like the US, and if you look at the 4 biggest companies in the world right now, Facebook, Uber, Amazon, and I don't remember one of them, maybe Google. Apple, maybe they said that we don't care about degrees anymore, right? They came up on a press conference a few months ago, and they said as long as you have the necessary skill sets, we don't care if you have a degree from Stanford or from Wharton, or if you're just a coder from your backyard, from your garage, we don't care. As long as you have the skills, you're free to go. So this trend has already started, wherein the skill sets have become more important, the tools have become a lot more important, and education also needs to follow that path. It cannot be still based on rote learning, about making people sit down and not talk, because I think this has been one of the biggest problems of the Indian education system. If you look at it, it doesn't tell you how to ask questions. It doesn't teach you how to be curious, because it really brings down the energy of kids from a very young age, because they do not know how to interact with people. And it's a big problem that stops them from going to their full potential. And that's why they're not questioning the way that education works right now as well. They'll go on with their 4-year engineering degree, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what happens is at the end of the 4-year degree, while they're at it, they're not trying to get better at what they're doing, which means at the end of those 4 years, they're exactly like all the 60 or 120 other people in their class, and they have nothing, absolutely nothing to differentiate themselves in the market. That is the problem. And because this education system in some way breeds mediocrity. That's the problem. So that's been one of the challenges that we've been trying to focus a lot on. Try and create opportunities for people to question things around them, to kind of bring out the best in them, because I feel that's the only way forward.
Yeah, bring out mediocrity possibly is another word for commoditization, right? So it's the same common denominator across all of these. And me being, apart from maybe one or two members of the audience, definitely the most ancient person around in this room, will be permitted to say that when we grew up, we were forced to have human interaction every single day. You went to the bank, there was a queue for the teller. You went to the cinema, there was a queue for box office. You went to buy a ticket, there was a queue outside. You went to mainland China to have your dinner, there was a queue outside, right? So for every single activity that you did in your entire day, you were forced to have human interactions. And because a large majority of these would occur under circumstances of humidity or rain or delays, essentially things which are unpleasant, right? You were schooled in handling unpleasantness when it happens with human interactions. Now, the demographic that you're addressing, they are super brilliant when it comes to adoption or just internalizing of technology, because they're digital natives. And it's not their fault, it's the fault of the early generation, as I'm not quoting myself, but Simon Sinek who says that, right? It's the fault of the parents of the millennials that they have not been taught human interaction. So when you go from that brilliant gadget that you've made to a client presentation, and there's that one question that comes to you from a client or an angel investor that you haven't hypothesized, right? That you haven't envisaged, you don't know how to deal with it, because you have no idea how to deal with human dynamics.
So you want me to talk about that?
But apropos of that, right? I was thinking maybe there needs to be, and we talked about this a little bit, there needs to be another stream, like a parallel. So the degrees are not going anywhere, right?
No, of course not.
Right? But you need a parallel stream of education, coaching, mentoring. I'm just wondering how offbeat that needs to be.
Yeah, so we actually had a conversation about this earlier. This is not staged, ladies and gentlemen, this whole talk, but we just happened to talk over the phone a couple of days ago, and we're just trying to get to know each other. And so it's one of these things that we've started very recently. It's a school for the future, is the way that we look at it. It's called Offbeat Calcutta, and it's a school where people can essentially, from anywhere, we try to change the way that education is looked at, and it's not taking it away from the side of all these degrees that are important, but sort of an add-on to it. So you can come in for a 4 or 5 day, 6 day program wherein we're teaching you how to get better at controlling your, not controlling your emotion, but having a leash on them and being able to control the outbursts and all that using Tai Chi on one side. And on the other side, you can come in and learn about Internet of Things or virtual reality or any of the other modern technologies. And the idea was to also sort of create an ecosystem around it, because we want young people in this part of the country especially to lead the generation, lead the future. And I'm a huge believer in this city. I'm a huge believer in the potential that Calcutta has. I mean, if you look at a Bombay now, or a Delhi, or a Bangalore, where most of these people who are doing, a lot of these people who are doing really good things, are people who were essentially from Kolkata or from West Bengal or from the eastern India. They're not in Kolkata anymore because of a lack of economic opportunity. That's why they go to a different city or a different state, and they become hugely successful in what they're doing. They find that one thing that really works for them. So the idea was to create a school which breeds interdisciplinarity, which breeds experiential learning, sort of learning while not just you're in the classroom, but you're amongst a bunch of people who are very different from who you are. And if you're an engineer, let's face it, engineers face this one very big problem, that you're there in a room in front of your computer coding, and you do not get to interact enough with people outside to build empathy with an audience outside. You do not get to build the confidence in order to stand in front of a stage in front of 20 people or 200 people, whatever the fact of the matter might be, and actually have a conversation. So building emotional intelligence is very important if you want to, I feel, want to succeed in life. Because either you are an absolutely outlier sort of an engineer, you go out there, you can code so well that Google picks you up and pays you a ton of money to retain you. But on the other hand, for every regular engineer, if you look at that bracket, you need to be able to converse with your human resource director. You need to be able to converse with people who are in your office who are not from the same background as you. And for you to be able to do that, interdisciplinarity in education is very required. I'm going to give an example here, like one of a very interesting company that came out of France, and we were very fortunate to meet one of the people who were driving that. Was a company which makes headphones for horses. And yeah, I know it sounds really funny, but actually there's a company which creates these headphones where you can put it on a racehorse. And racehorses have a very weird thing where they get agitated very easily. So if there's like external noise somewhere, if there's a generator humming in the background, you get very, and I don't know, you might have had some experience around horses because you seem to be nodding very vigorously.
It happened in the academy.
In the academy, right? If you have horses. Yeah, and they get very agitated. Yeah,
they don't put it. Yeah, they do. Yeah. I've fallen many times. Yeah, they do.
And especially if it's a racehorse, then the degree of the fall can be quite dangerous, right? So this company, this lady came up with this idea. She was a horse rider, and her brother was an engineer. So they brought both of those disciplines together and made headphones for horses, which they sell for tons of money. They've been hugely successful in terms of the funding that they've gotten, only because they are able to play like, I don't know, smooth jazz music through headphones, which, and the horses are more stable, the horse riders are much happier, and they only were able to do it because of interdisciplinarity. So if we take a page out of that book and try to use it in our lives, there's one thing that our parents tell us to study, and there's another thing which we really like doing. If you're able to join both of them together, voila, maybe we have like the magic sauce to getting ahead in life. So that was the idea of Offbeat Calcutta. We just launched about 5 days ago. Let's see how that goes. The idea is to bring back all of these very smart, talented people from across the country back into. You're already from Kolkata. Bring them back to Kolkata. That's so the goal.
Okay. So best wishes for all quirky ideas.
Thank you very much.
We'll go back to a point that Ravi mentioned a little while ago. Yeah, he talked about building in laws, building in legislation, building in checks and balances to safeguard, right, against hacking, against insurgency, terrorism, etc. There is a flip side to that as well, right? You can do stewardship. When stewardship crosses a line, it becomes Big Brother is watching you, or it becomes a Chinese model where everything is blocked out apart from what is officially deemed to be acceptable, right? Where should we, you see, be drawing a line, and how do you see that playing out?
Okay, so before answering what the government's line is, what they're doing, let me give you an example. My wife just WhatsApp, where are you? So I have to send her pictures to prove that I'm not, in some inappropriate place. And she's like, call me immediately after you do this. So she's like a big brother in that way. So yes, technology has made our life very tough because, answering your question a little later, but it's not about the government playing an Orwellian role. It's not about India, China, US. It's actually that technology has actually made us very vulnerable. We simply put, if you see some phones, in the torch also, it asks for your location. We are all using Uber, Ola very easily. Uber मिल गया, भैया मैं आ रहा है, Ola अरे 50 रुपए कम कर दो. But we don't realize that there are bodies who are observing our movement all the time. When we see the Google map, we give orders to our driver, we are being watched. We really don't understand. It's not about the government, it's about the body corporate. It's a pure corporate issue. I love the point which Meghdut made that, things existed even before technology was there. The district of Midnapur was running even 100 years back. Some district magistrate of ICS was running it. There was not even an email, there was not even probably a car. I stayed in a bungalow in Ghatal when I was the SDM, and it had 24 feet high doors. I used to ask the cooks and all, "Itna ucha kyun hai?" Saab ghode mein aate the us time. It's a fact. So that's a very valid point he's made. So when we talk about an Orwellian thing happening, it's actually a flip side of technology, and I really don't think government alone can really play a big role. It's also the alertness, it's also the awareness of the people as a whole. We download apps without reading. Obviously we can't read the fine print. We simply accept. Usi mein the devil is in the details. There have been cases like Shiksha and all who have stolen data and sold it abroad. So the idea is that the Orwellian thing is also because of our comforts. Jitna zyada hum depend kar rahe on technology, utna zyada we are being monitored. The more our phones have, if you all see your phones right now, go to your location and check which apps are accessing your location. Now any of those owners, have you read the terms and conditions? Have you? Anybody in the room?
Yes.
Very good. So, but still you might be hacked. So once we don't read, except for this lady in the room, nobody else has. I never have. Please come. We simply accept the terms and conditions, and now today if someone wants to see where Rajan is, where Meghdut is, where Ravi is, it's easily possible. So, Orwellian role, now the government, if you come to the government, recently if you know 20th of December, the Home Ministry made a notification that the 10 central agencies, including the Income Tax, the Customs, the Enforcement Directorate and all, can go into any computer system, saying it's a part of the IT Act. Now there's a debate going on, and Supreme Court has said it seeks a report within 6 weeks. So I cannot really comment on the judicial part and sub judice matter, but yes, it is Orwellian, and it's not just the government, it's the body corporate. And let me tell you, my friend Avik, it's not, we are far better than many other countries. In China, they have their own operating system, and they will only show what they want to show.
Yes.
At least here, you could very well see anything, you could talk anything in the AKLF, and you could do, I mean, we are, I would say, pretty progressive democracy that way. But Orwellian thing, yes, it's there in the entire world, it's not just India.
I have a question.
We just park it, give us
Sure.
another 5 minutes.
Sure.
We don't have questions, no worries. You talked about we are better than so many other countries, and that's true. But there's also a case where we can learn from the economies that are ahead of the curve, right? And Ravi, you've got pretty much a global bird's eye view that you articulate in your book, India Connected, right? So what are some of the lessons learned, particularly, but not necessarily just exclusive for the West, that India can take cognizance of?
Well, for one, I think we talked about GDPR in the beginning, and for those of you who don't know what GDPR is, that's Europe's mechanism to force companies to not use their data in certain ways, your data in certain ways. So it regulates that. America will likely have some form of that regulation as well in 2019, if not the year after. And you mentioned that India may have its own form of regulation. So certainly that's a classic example of India learning from the West and realizing that on the one hand, it needs to stop companies from purely using our data and commoditizing it and then selling it on. So there's that. And then the second part of that is countries themselves. How do countries use data? On this particular point, India, as you said, is far better than China for obvious reasons. But that said, India is not great either. I mean, so there's the Aadhaar debate, which all of you are very aware of. But the problem with the Aadhaar debate in India is that on the one hand, you have the government and the proponents of Aadhaar who will never acknowledge that there have been leakages and that this is a system that needs to be fixed. And on the other hand, you have critics of Aadhaar who will refuse to acknowledge that there is some good to this system. It can be used to improve the way people are accessing subsidies or the way they get other government benefits. So India is somewhere in the middle, and I think the key for India moving forward would be to implement something that looks like GDPR very quickly so that it can control corporate entities that are Western and in India, but also Indian entities, number one. Number two, for the government itself to sort out Aadhaar, to fix the leakages, first of all accept that there are leakages and then fix them, and turn that into a public, transparent process. And then the third part of all of this, and India's route forward, should be digital and media literacy. For all of the techno-optimists who claim that the phone is transforming India or the internet is transforming India, all of this is true, it is transformative, but you have to teach Indians how to use their phone. You just spoke about location services. You're right, no one is going to read the fine print, but if you had advertising on TV every day, if you had public service campaigns, if you had school campaigns to teach people how to use these devices, how to protect themselves from companies that might want to mine their data, how to protect themselves from handing out their location and their data to everyone, you need to teach them. And in the same way that the Indian government, when I was growing up, it used to have ads on safe sex. It used to have ads on not drinking and driving. You need to invest the same things in the technological sector, and I don't think the Indian government has started taking that seriously enough. And then the last leg of this is media literacy. The vast majority of Indians who are reading stuff on WhatsApp, a lot of it, as you know, is fake news, but most Indians aren't equipped to tell the difference between real news and fake news. Basic media literacy of this is a news piece that was written by a media organization that we can trust. Is it transparent? Can you see who's funding them? Are they funded by someone connected with a political party or not? When you're reading the piece, how do you determine whether it is, is there a dateline? Was it written by a journalist who has a track record of writing good pieces or not? Basic stuff like that. When I read a newspaper, I, as a journalist, instinctively am able to see and tell whether something is trustworthy or not. That comes with practice, but it also comes with training, and that's a training that we have to realize. We have to pass on to the rest of India. So those are my thoughts on basic lessons that Indians could learn. But I also want to say one more thing about jobs, which we were talking about a few minutes ago. I am equally concerned, as you, Meghdut, about the way in which young children can waste time on social media. And I think it's something that we need to look at closely. We need to monitor, parents need to monitor, parents need to be taught that they need to monitor these things in their children. But at the same time, I think ultimately what we are giving people through technology and smartphones is choice. And for those of us who have grown up with choice, because we're all quite privileged here, it's one thing to have that choice intrinsically, it's another thing to withhold it from others. The beauty of the technological moment we're in is that everyone has that choice. And they would much rather have that choice than not have that choice. For me, from where I sit, the biggest change that phones will bring to India in the job space is the fact that the e-commerce market, for example, will create tens of millions of jobs in the space of packing and warehousing. As more of you get more stuff on delivery, on Swiggy and Zomato, and you order stuff from Amazon, who's going to deliver it for you? It's going to be delivered by young men mostly, not women, who will be working in warehouses, who will be packing and delivering stuff for you. Those are the kinds of jobs that India needs to create, and that's where, again, technology is going to be a big boon for India, because India is not creating enough jobs. It needs help. Technology is a big help there.
Can I take something up on that? So when you talk about these jobs that we should be creating in terms of warehousing, if we look at some of the big companies who've been doing that, let's look at a Walmart. Almost 70 to 75% of all of these sort of labor-intensive end of the bracket jobs are done by drones. If you're looking at,
but that's in the West, not in India.
Not yes, but again, should we be looking at creating jobs for like this, which are quite labor intensive, as you yourself implicated, and at the same time not tell people that, hey, maybe your job could be at stake if you're not looking at improving yourself. My point was, I completely agree with that. That choice exists, but I would also like to say, have you seen the new Black Mirror episode, the movie that came out, Bandersnatch? Everyone has a choice. You have so many choices. Every single person has a different storyline that you go through till the end. But what it also kind of tries to tell through this entire thing is that you do not actually have that much choice. You think that you have a choice, that every single the choice of the conflict that you're
using. Isn't that for elites? If you're a laborer working in a village in India, your choices are very limited. So basically, if you show up for a job interview at Domino's, you will get the job, right? Because they just need someone to deliver something. So the key is to get that person to Domino's. That connection can only be made by technology.
But I also think that that connection can be made through education, because I think education itself is probably the biggest enabler in even more than technology.
I mean, they complement.
The complements to.
You know, India's opened one university every single day for the last 10 years. Most of those universities are crap.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and so there's a reason why companies, when they come to India, they can't hire people who graduate from most Indian universities because they're simply not taught basic skills. And the bit where I disagree with you again, actually, is that Google and Apple would happily take graduates of MIT and Harvard. The reason why when they come to India, they put you in training for 6 months is because most Indian graduates are focused on, you know, their engineering degree, but they're not getting the benefits of a liberal arts degree which you would get in the West. So India's focused on, has been focused on education for a while, but it's been focused on it in the wrong way. And this is where technology could enable a little bit more of democracy in India. I'm not saying that we don't need to focus on education, it's just that quality control has really been hard here. You know, and that's where the poorest Indians have been suffering, because they get these degrees, they're useless in the market. Most Uber drivers I've taken in Delhi and Bombay, they tend to be engineering graduates. They're simply unemployable.
But I'm going to also give you a situation again. It's not like I completely disagree with you. I agree with you to a certain point. But if you look at like Purulia, for example, or Uttar Dinajpur, any of these places, for most of these people, if one of their children gets a job, if you look at a family, if one of their children get into an engineering college, it means that at least the future of that family is going to be safer than what it would have been.
Yes.
And even though it might be the lowest common denominator of engineering education in the world, it's still better than nothing. I'm not saying that...
You're assuming they'll get a job afterwards.
At least they're going to not be working in the fields as their parents would have. It's at least a way out. I'm not saying it's the answer to this problem, but I'm saying education still continues to be that kind of an enabler where that family has a way out. That family would at least be able to afford, permanent roofing on its house for more than 2 square meals a day. So, I mean, it's a bit of a nuance, I guess, but I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's...
Point taken.
Gentlemen, in the colloquialism of technological language, we'll have to take the rest of the debate offline.
Yes.
Yeah. And the reason why we're getting close to stoppage time, and I can sense there are at least a few people in the audience who are bursting to ask questions, so I want to open it up. A lady here who will raise her hand first. Yes, you.
I guess you can hear me.
I joined the discussion a bit late, so excuse me if I have missed out a couple of points, and I don't understand much about it. But then again, most of the apps that we use, WhatsApp, things that we use on a regular basis, and if you do not opt for it, you're kind of left out. You need it for your regular day-to-day stuff. Then again, it kind of asks you to accept a couple of clauses, not just your location, also it has remote access to the data you've stored in your device, including it can switch on the camera and the speaker of your phone, microphone of your mobile handset. I don't understand why they require that. This is almost, we have reached that Batman zone of sci-fi where someone starts it and they can hear remotely whatever you're speaking, even when you're not using your device, just because your device is switched on. So I don't understand why that's required and how safe are we in that scenario?
Do you want to take that?
I mean, one of the reasons why Facebook would want to use your camera is that Facebook is connected to Messenger, through which you can have a chat with someone else. Same for WhatsApp. They need your contacts, they need your camera, because you're speaking to people, you're chatting with
Why do
people.
you need that when we're not using Facebook? Like, I've uninstalled Facebook from my handset, personally. But then again, even WhatsApp, a lot of these service providers, these apps, they can access your microphone and your camera even when you don't want them to.
Yeah, so I actually don't know if that's, I don't know how that works. I don't know the technology behind it. If you're asking why they want to do that, the reason is obvious. They're companies, they want to exploit every last bit of data they can possibly get. So more fool on us for clicking on the yes button, for using it, and for not pushing back more. But I think one thing that we've learned over the last couple of years with all the revelations about Cambridge Analytica, Everything we now know about how the likes of Google and Facebook are able to monitor us, are able to monetize the data that they've collected on us and sell it on to third parties. Look, this is where, as engaged citizens, A, we need to know what's going on. B, we need to pressure our governments wherever we are to do something about it. Europe, as we've been saying, has been the first serious player to look at GDPR and to put in place these things. Even so, some of the fines we've seen the EU slap on the likes of Google and Apple are tiny slaps on the wrist. I mean, if Google gets a $10 billion fine, they're laughing all their way to the bank. It is nothing for them. So this has to be a more global movement. There has to be, far greater restrictions on these companies. And really the media plays a big role here as well. I think, for journalists to be able to report on these things and spread awareness about it is equally important. Part of the whole problem here is that 5 or 6 years ago, we were so enamored by the notion that this is an amazing bit of technology. The phone is great, all of these amazing apps are going to save the world, they're going to connect us all, our lives are going to be better. That was too good to be true. We all fell for it and we're all dealing with it now, but it's not too late.
Can I say something on that? Sorry, 1 second. Which brings us to the absolute absence of choice, because you want to be on it and you don't want to be on it. And are you on Instagram?
No.
You're not on Instagram. Anyone here on Instagram? You're on Instagram, right? Have you ever had this conversation with your very close friend where you're talking about that really interesting piece of hardware that you'd like to get, maybe a new camera, a new device, and next thing you know, it appears.
It comes on your ad.
It's called deep learning. It's this technique that's been used and very successfully for the first time by Instagram, where it has almost tripled their ad revenue through it. So the answer is very simple. You really do not have a choice. If you're using, you're selling your privacy. You're selling your data, which is very, very valuable to these big corporations. And I'm not even getting into that government part.
No, it's fine.
You can.
So I'll add something to what Meghdut is just telling. It's about Alexa. I don't know how many of you have heard it. There was a couple that was fighting and using some sensuous and private words in America, and Alexa finally sends the details to another friend through that particular Alexa, and that speaks, your friend is talking like this, and that lady calls up, okay, what's happening? Why is my Alexa telling me what's happening at your place? So, I mean, you can understand what are we heading to. And in fact, in another case, just as a case study, the same thing happened that Alexa heard that two people were talking about certain sneakers, and they get a flyer next day at their home from a particular company on their address saying that we have these options of sneakers, so you know where we.
I had a question. Sorry, lady in the back had a question.
So there's a couple of reasons why I want to ask this question. The first one, there's a lot of economists, and also it's very easy to understand that there are cycles in innovation, as well as all the drawbacks that we talked about, especially with smartphones and new technologies. Just out of curiosity to all the panelists, is there a new individual gadget after the smartphone? Do you see far ahead that something else is going to either replace it or transform it, and how do you envision this maybe continuation of that technology, or maybe the end of it for all these drawbacks? What is next?
Can I take that?
Sure.
I think it's your mind. Your mind's getting slowly more and more connected with the internet, and there's a reason for it. So it's if you've heard of this gentleman called Elon Musk, he started this company called Neuralink about 5 years ago, and they've been working on deep tech where your brain gets connected to the computer. And what's going to eventually happen is that we're going to be virtually indistinguishable from the nearest piece of technology. At the end of the day, your smartphone's going to be part of you. So it's the way that, again, if you look at some novel, I read this Dan Brown novel very recently.
Sounds very scary,
Technion. Yeah, so it's considered to be like the seventh, I forgot what it's, flora, fauna, all of these things, what are they called, that entire class. The seventh one is apparently going to be called Technion, and that's the connection between the human mind and technology all completely synced together. Basically, you get ready to become cyborgs, ladies and gentlemen.
So absolutely no security or privacy.
Going to be a bit complicated if you ask me at this point, but yeah, let's see.
Is it commendable for you?
For me, I spend 6 hours on my phone every day. I think I'm already sold out a bit on that. But for people who do not want to just try and take that example, delete your Facebook if you do not want to become its slave. But if you're on it and if you're benefiting from it, then don't be surprised if it benefits from you as well.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So technology has given birth to problems like the Blue Whale Challenge and the Momo Challenge. So what do you think is to blame for it? Is it technology or is it the mental state of teenagers? If technology wasn't there, would they have found some other outlet to do this?
No, don't. You take it.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
I'm Lipshika.
Lipshika, I'm just Meghdut can answer your question, but I tell you, it's also about the social systems changing. 10 years now, I would not be much older to you, but yeah, 10, 20 years back, parents actually gave time to kids. Whether it's father or mother or chacha or chachi or dada dadi. Nowadays, what's the situation like? A kid will only be on the verge of doing a blue whale thing because probably the mom or the dad is not even talking to them for weeks. It's actually not technology. We simply blame technology because, it could be one of the, like he said, technology is a part of life. Or like even Meghdut said, it's a social structure which is changing so dramatically and we're not able to deal with that change. So in that vacuum, we need all these apps to, date and find people, and we need the release, right? So that's how it gets molded. So I would say,
It's like an alternative concept.
yeah, it's actually loneliness. If you see joint families, you think the kids use apps. एक थप्पड़ पड़ता है चाचा से, उसको ये टाइम ही नहीं होता है. Only when you're actually lonely would you get involved so much that you're so influenced. So I'm telling you, it's not about the technology. You cannot blame the app. Yes, there is something wrong if you are motivating people to die. Then there's entire dark web and all that thing which I don't talk about. But it's also about life. Technology और कुछ हो जाएगा. And yes, we are in a phase where we are a confused generation because at least our parents were traditional. So we are like ABCD, or you can say coconuts, brown from outside, white from inside. We don't know what exactly are we doing. So in that phase of confusion, we are. Meghdut can probably.
No, that's okay. I think there was
another question. I thought.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you mentioned that now you have all of these connections with the local panchayats and things like that.
Right, ma'am.
And a person is able to, mention that I'm having this trouble, I don't have electricity, or the roads are not good, or whatever it is. But how many people are actually using that?
Very good question. Very good question. See, ma'am, the question is very good. How many people are actually using it also depends on how much the government encourages them to ask. So yes, discretion is there. If all three of us are district magistrates of three districts, say Darjeeling, Alipurdwar and say Purulia, if he doesn't want his life to be disturbed, he will not do any information campaign to let people know this exists. So as my friends rightly pointed out, it's not just making the laws and systems are there. It also now depends on how much you're making the people aware. But generally now it's much more transparent and people are aware, because wherever their rights are involved, their benefit is involved, they will certainly take a call. So much better than before, but a lot of things do still happen. I would not say it's perfect. We need a lot of marketing IEC, like I think you had mentioned, that the government has to make people aware, trainings have to be done, like safe drive, like in childhood education, yes. So a lot has to be done, but improve one.
Any other questions before we?
Pass the mic.
I'll try to make it a bit quick. There are lots of apps like Facebook, which is considered to be social media, and we actually do not pay anything for logging in and doing the stuff that we do there. So there they earn their revenue through data, through marketing, etc. And then there are apps through which you buy a movie ticket and still it asks all your data, access to all your data. So I think as users, we need to be educated that nothing is free in life. You might think that browsing in Facebook is free, it's not. But I would say that first we need to tackle those companies which are selling a product, at the same time it's accessing your data and trying to make revenue out of that as well. So there are a lot of user education needs to be done in this regard about what is your owners and what is the company's owners. Because at the end of the day, Facebook can't run for free. We should also not believe that Facebook runs for free. So I think for all the users, there should be a proper, in whatever way, education in this regard. I just thought of sharing this with the people around me. I hope you guys agree with me.
Yeah, we agree with.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being such a wonderfully participative audience, and thanks Ravi Agrawal, Rajan Kapoor, Meghdut Chowdhury. It's been a pleasure. We will have to move away because I've got all my friends giving me intensely black looks. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists. So as we are time bound, we didn't want even the discussion to end, but we have to move forward. And my question remained unanswered. I still had a question.